Welcome to Breaking Silos, a podcast that shines a light on the incredible partnerships happening across campuses every day. I'm your host, Shane Baglini from Muhlenberg College. Join me every 2 weeks for discussions with some of the best minds in higher ed marketing, enrollment management, student affairs, campus leadership, and more. Breaking Silos is part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. We've got another special episode of Breaking Silos here live from Element 451's Engage Summit here in Raleigh. I just talked to Bart Kaler not long ago, and I'm talking to his co-host now of the Higher Ed Marketer podcast, Troy Singer, who's also a digital marketing specialist at Ring Digital. Troy, welcome, and thanks for your time.
Oh, my pleasure. However, I think you did not set me up for success putting after Bart, but I'll try to hold it down. Maybe people will listen to this conversation before they hear Bart.
That's right.
It'll all be good.
So, well, it's interesting because I'm talking to you both separately is an interesting, I'm interested to hear your perspectives on some of the things that Bart and I talked about, but I do want to talk to you about something specifically that I think a lot of marketing professionals listening to this and other podcasts would find really interesting. And I sort of referenced this in my enlightening talk yesterday afternoon here at the conference about mid-funnel engagement and marketing. Mm-hmm. And so tell us about your experience with Ring Digital, working with marketing leaders and other folks on campuses to address sometimes nebulous, hard to handle piece of the funnel, that mid-funnel piece.
Sure. And I will say that this is something that we do at Ring Digital every day, but there are other services that offer similar. So as you know, Shane, in higher ed marketing, a lot of the digital advertising is usually done to fill the top of the funnel, to go out and to find prospects that either because of their behavior or because of something that they've done online or cookies, your school or an institution thinks they may be a great candidate for us to pursue in order to bring in. And that is about 95% of digital marketing that happens. While as we start to think into the enrollment funnel, as you described, the mid-funnel, it's kind of important for us to concentrate on bringing inquiries through.
Yeah.
But there haven't been a lot of solutions for that. Now there are, because of something called household targeted digital marketing. And at a high level, you can consider it direct mail done digitally, whereby you can.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I like that too. I'm going to have to incorporate that more. But what you're able to do is to take that same mailing address list, apply a proprietary tech to it, and it enables you to connect with the digital devices of the people who are on that mailing list that live in those houses. And it uses what's called a device ID. And you can think of it similar to all of us have a social security number or a number that's very unique to us. All devices have a unique number.
Yeah.
And then you can target the device, which is attached to either the prospective student, in case of higher ed, and their parents, which parent comm flows are very important.
Yeah.
And if you're talking undergrad, yes. If you're talking graduate, then the other stakeholders in the household might be a wife or a spouse,
sure.
etc.
Well, that's fascinating. And I don't know if you've ever met Day Cabilds or listened to her podcast, but she does a podcast called Talking Tactics on Enrollify. And I feel like this is one that I think a lot of people would really gravitate to, because it is, we spend a lot of time and effort getting people into the funnel. Mm-hmm. And once they're there, I don't think it's a stretch to say we have not perfected the art of keeping them in the funnel and moving them through. So it's really, I love the way that you just described that as direct mail done digitally. I think that really resonates with me. So at Ring Digital and in your experience, talk about some ways that you all have helped schools do this. And are there any, that jump to your mind, any really kind of strong examples of a school really owning that middle of the funnel that you can think of, or just some strategies that have worked for
Yeah.
you?
There are a few, especially when we engage with them, because they do start to concentrate on how can I increase the frequency of the amount of messaging that I put in front of my inquiries. The people that they're moving to application or to admit, to deposit, all the way through. We even are able to put messages in front of them during the summer to help decrease their melt rate.
Hmm.
And that's the way these are used. And it's easier and less expensive than direct mail.
Sure.
And I am a proponent of direct mail. I was a direct mailer for 25 years before I found this. So I'm a believer. At the same time, there are postal costs, there are paper costs, whereby now we're able to put this messaging in front of that same ideal audience that you want to move the needle with. And when compared with when an institution does the exact same thing without the tech compared to doing all the same with the tech,
Yeah.
there's usually at least a double digit increase in lift and yield. And I'm not talking just like 11 or 12%, 20% and above,
Yeah.
because usually we encourage having a control group so we can kind of show the institution there is a needle that's being used.
Yeah. That's wow. 25% would be
Yes.
would be attractive to a lot of people. So this is breaking silos, and I'm wondering your sort of thoughts on how can marketers on campus better collaborate in that mid funnel area with, let's say, financial aid or career services, or is there value that we can get from simply partnering with others to produce content, to set up meetings in that mid funnel and have handoffs and things like that? What are your general thoughts on how a marketer can go about enhancing their mid funnel marketing with others on campus?
Sure. And as you asked that, we can take the view of it takes a village to recruit a student. And although my usual point of contact is with an enrollment and or someone within marketing outreach on behalf of enrollment. But that's not to say that using technology like this to move the needle for financial aid, for any type of action that's going to enhance that next step through the matriculation process, for them working together. And that, as being someone that has not worked on campus, sometimes have been surprising to me when I hear about the silos and I see that firsthand, and seeing that departments might not work as closely or as easily as they could work with one another. And you're probably going to ask me, why is that, Troy? So,
Why is that, Troy?
well, let me tell you, I think, working in the private sector, and I see there's a emphasis more on what do we all need to do to get this done. And I think that's one of the reasons why, and I'm not the first person to say this, and listeners have probably heard this all along, that higher ed moves at a slower pace than the private sector. And I think it comes down to tradition, that, both tradition of higher ed has a certain air, and there's certain power bases that people are protective of. And
Yeah.
some of that can lie within the data that they have or the information,
Sure.
and might not be as open to relinquish that. Or if I relinquish this, what does that mean for the power that I have? And it might not be intentional.
Yeah.
It's just the culture of higher ed. That's why decisions are made slower. That's why sometimes it takes more meetings than it should, or more emails than it should, to get things done. With that said, I think there isn't a more sincere community than the higher ed community. And even though that tradition, puts obstacles out there, I think at the end of the day, everyone realizes that they are there for one thing, and that's the success of the student through the success of the institution.
Yeah.
So things get done. Might not be as easy or as fast as some of us on the other side thinks that it could be.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. But you're right. I mean, I think in general, people working in higher ed are doing it for an altruistic reason, and it's right. It's to see that student walk across the stage at commencement. So that point resonates with me. So the Higher Ed Marketer podcast,
Yeah.
you and Bart have talked to who's who of higher ed marketers, and we were talking before this that silos have been a theme that you've noticed in talking with people. So, what advice would you have as somebody on the outside, kind of looking in, so it's not working on a campus? What advice would you have for somebody either in a leadership position or not to start the process of saying, how can we collaborate better together? And I'm interested to hear from your sort of private sector lens, but also a lens that's really in tune with higher ed, just based on the podcast.
Mm-hmm. As you ask that question, a person's name comes to mind, Jenny Petty,
Hmm.
who we have interviewed at least once, and I've had conversations with her. And the thing that stands out with her is this is someone that came to higher ed from the private sector that at first was very frustrated with the slow pace and some of the silo
Yeah.
obstacles
Yeah.
that you describe. And when I think of answering the question, it's leaning on leaders that are outside of higher ed and maybe leaning on them for advice or leaning on your vendors who most likely see these same issues popping up with other institutions that they work with, and making sure that you are leaning on them to the point of confiding, listening, and then the people that are on the outside in the private sector can probably give you advice on how to get things done in 2 weeks rather than 2 months or sometimes 2 years. I'm not sure if you've had Jenny on the
I've not,
podcast.
but you're on my list, Jenny, if you're listening.
Yes, and I can certainly make that introduction. But that is someone that speaks to it on our podcast. She spoke to it and it made sense. We've also had some other people, Shane, like, and I don't recall the gentleman's name, but he was an implementer from a CRM that works with a lot of institutions, that he has to work with both marketing, enrollment, and then whoever holds the data, IT, and has developed great ways of communicating with all of them and then including them in those communications to break through those silos that on campus seem to be up between those departments.
Yeah, that's great. I love Jenny, and she is somebody that she's coming from private industry,
Big private industry,
private industry.
Fortune 100 company.
Yeah, and those companies are doing things in a much more efficient way than most companies and certainly most institutions. So I love that point about looking elsewhere, because I do it a lot in my work. What's the customer service experience like with big brands? What kind of advertising is Nike doing, and how are they doing things? So that's great advice.
And they have the marketing budgets to develop it and to experiment. So why not take their learnings, their successes, and implement it where you don't have the budgets in higher ed to make those types of mistakes? Hopefully, when you execute a program, it has to work.
Right. Yeah, the best ideas are probably already thought of.
Absolutely. And why not borrow them?
Why not? Yeah. So closing out here, Troy, we were talking golf yesterday, which is a subject near and dear to both of our hearts. But you were telling me about something that changed your perspective on getting on the golf course and sort of goal setting. And I thought it was interesting in general for golf, but more of like a life lesson. Tell me about this idea of, for those that don't play golf, usually par is around 72 or 71. But you were telling me that you've been following somebody that says set par to your kind of standard of where you want to be, and it changed your mindset on things. So talk us through that a little bit.
Absolutely, Shane. And I was giving you that secret because we live in two different parts of the country. I didn't think we would have to play one another. So if any of my golf buddies are listening, tune this out. But I was been frustrated for over 20 years trying to reach that stated par that's on every scorecard. But the reality is there's less than 1% of the population, the golfing population, that can actually achieve that. And most other people would be served better if they make a more realistic par, which is the likelihood that you're going to get into the hole in a certain amount of strokes. And as I told you yesterday, what has really helped my mindset and my enjoyment is to add one stroke to every hole, which so instead of a par 72, my golf course par is now a 90. And I compare that to the pros that do play at a 72. So if I shoot an 87 or an 88, I'm 2 under par for me. And that is good. And I'm going
Yeah.
to continue that mindset. In business, I think it's the same thing. A lot of times we set unrealistic expectations for ourselves or for the organizations around us, instead of looking outwardly and basing our goals on the elite or the people that are on the outside that we want to be like. I think baby steps and being realistic of where you are, setting those expectations, which might be a little bit of a stretch, but very attainable, helps with the mindset. So that's what I was describing to you.
And I was thinking about it, getting ready for this interview, about how it could apply, and you just touched on it, how it can apply to institutions, and being willing and comfortable to set attainable, achievable expectations, expectations that make sense for your institution. Your expectations, at Muhlenberg College might be very different than expectations at Harvard or at Purdue or one of the, these massive institutions. So kind of setting our expectations can really change our outlook on what success actually means. So I love that example.
Thank you. It makes my golf experience much more enjoyable. And as a result, I have performed better, because when I get into a problem or an issue, I'm not trying to dig myself out of a hole by doing something that I really can't do, but I think I can do because I saw someone on TV do it a few days ago. But just take my lump
and move on
and go in, and I'm actually not making as many mistakes doing that.
Yeah, I love that. Well, Troy, thanks again for your time. I encourage everybody to listen to The Higher Ed Marketer. I've been lucky enough to be a guest on the show, and Bart and Troy are excellent hosts and really, really bright marketing minds. So I would encourage everybody to go listen.
I appreciate you saying that, but most importantly, I appreciate the invite to have this conversation with you.
Absolutely. Breaking Silos is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry best as your hosts. Learn from Dave Kibilds, Jenny Lee Fowler, Eddie Francis, and many more of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.